Welcome to the Reclaim Leader podcast. I'm Jason Tucker.
And I'm Jesse Skiffington.
We're two pastors in the trenches who are passionate about church health for greater gospel impact.
We share the ups and downs of ministry, strategies that worked for us,
and some that didn't.
Best practices and practical tools for church leadership.
The goal, to help all of our churches flourish. Let's get started.
See another sunrise, sing a little song.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Reclaim Leader podcast. Jesse, I don't know if you've noticed, I'm at an angle now.
Yeah.
I'm not straight onto the camera. Just trying something new. I'm noticing all the cool kids are doing angles.
Yeah. I haven't seen this side of you in years, Jason. So
That's actually true.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think today we're sort of following up with last week's episode on meetings, getting more impact out of less meetings. Mm-hmm. And this is another really practical one that I think is so important. It's about how do we move to cultivate a healthy elder board. In the Presbyterian tradition, we have elder governance, but no matter what tradition you're a part of, whatever your governing board is, how do you get them to connect with one another, connect with God, help move things forward, mission, vision, strategy? This is all the really, really important stuff of ministry. And it's funny, I had somebody ask me about, like, how did you get to a point with your worship and you added another service? They want all the exciting outcomes, and just tell us what are the best practices so that we can best practice our way to the same results.
Yeah.
And if I'm being honest about that answer, it's because we have a healthy elder team. It's because we've been working together well for years and years, making all sorts of big and small decisions to get us to a point of where we are. This is the stuff that if you don't have a healthy governing team or healthy elder board, it's really hard to have a healthy church. It really is.
It sure is. Yeah. I think there's something about if you can have a thriving leadership team who has a vital relationship with Jesus personally, and that spills out into the team, then everything else is going to come out of that, right? The direction to move in, the ideas to try, the risks to take, there's going to be better discernment and all of that. And so having a healthy board, having a group that is working on themselves, growing in faith, not perfect people, but a healthy functioning team leads to good outcomes. And so our job in a lot of ways is to cultivate a culture in our leadership teams that moves it toward health, so that then healthy things can come out of our decisions. So that's a lot to say, Jason, but it's really crucial that this is the background work to the really good outcomes or the fruit that comes when we've done that work of being healthy in our leadership. So I'm looking forward to this. I think this is a really crucial conversation. I'm glad that you brought up this topic. And we've been through seasons where we maybe had some hard moments of creating this kind of culture, or maybe if you're a pastor out there, or maybe you're an elder, what it's like to be on an unhealthy leadership board. Maybe there's a couple people or one person that's really stuck and it's not healthy, and it's just has this deflating, destructive effect on the effectiveness of a team. So I think it's really important, and I look forward to, let's just kind of parse out some of these ideas and how can we move toward health, because this is what is going to yield those outcomes that we're all hoping for.
And the goal is unity, not uniformity. It's not that everybody has to agree on everything. Do we have a healthy working relationship that we can move forward on things, right?
Yeah, and that touches in a lot of areas. And I love healthy disagreement, healthy discussion, wrestling it out. So this is not about how to get a board of people to say yes to the things you want to do.
No, this isn't let's turn it into a rubber stamp board.
That's
not what we want. Okay. So let's get into it. I sort of frame this as 5 moves to move away from, and then the things we need to move toward. And you'll see what I mean when we get going. But the first one is move away from, and we talked about this last week, move away from routine agendas toward urgency around the mission.
Mm-hmm.
Develop urgency, clarity, and excitement about the mission and vision. I think one of the things that we do, the gravitational pull is, as we're getting ready for a meeting, is, okay, what did we do last month? Let me copy and paste that agenda. Mm-hmm. And let me plop in any sort of things we have to do this week. And we do it out of a sense of efficiency. which isn't bad. I understand why we do that. But here's the problem. We do that enough times, we start losing juice for running the meeting. We start losing juice in the meeting. And what do I mean by juice? I mean the excitement, the energy, the things that we need in order to sort of move the mission forward.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the first thing, move away from routine agendas. And a way that you could do that is just sit down with the Lord and just pray through, all right, God, this month we have our board meeting. After we sort of handle our business and whatever we need to vote yay or nay on, all those other things, what do we really need to be focusing on? God, what's the word from you? What's the big picture thing that we need? What would be the best use of our time? I mean, there have been times when Jesse, I have felt like we need to scrap everything we're doing and just pray together.
Mm-hmm.
I say run with that. Run with that. But you'll never know if you never stop and listen for God and you just kind of do the same thing over and over again.
Yeah. So as you're kind of sitting down to create an agenda, creating space to listen, to discern, how far ahead of time are you working on your specific elder board agenda?
It depends. Sometimes I'll get an idea early, like a few weeks before. But the norm is about a week before. I'm thinking about, okay, what do we need to cover? What do we need to discuss? And I just start writing on a piece of paper, just kind of what are some areas. Maybe there's it's a little bit of an art, not a science. So maybe you're perceiving this issue is happening amongst the leadership. It's happening maybe in the congregation, or maybe there's a big goal that we're trying to reach, or maybe there's a big situation we need to start paying attention to. Whatever those things are, I just try and discern what that could be. And then in the meeting, what I try to do is create conversation around it. So I'm not just presenting bullet points, but we're creating conversation around it. That's usually the best way that I've found to get toward mission and away from routine agendas.
Yeah, a questions-based approach, I think, is a really good one. You've noticed this. What do you guys think? Let's talk about this, and kind of open it up that way. And I think there's something really good that you hit on here. I've gone through stretches where it is easy to get into copy and paste mode, just from an efficiency standpoint. And then you kind of look up and you go, but if this is the most important meeting, or, among them, you got your staff team, maybe if you have a staff, and your elder board, if this is the most important meeting, how much time am I really investing in preparing for and planning for that meeting? And I think that's a question that is important. Am I going and sitting and listening for the Lord to put something on my heart? Am I putting a lot of thought into this? Or am I just kind of pushing it from month to month to month to month? And it kind of brings us back to the urgent and the important. There's so many urgent things. We got to write a sermon. We got to meet those people. We got to do the things. And so this something important like our session meeting maybe does get pushed off into this just cut and paste kind of mindset. But this could be the meeting, the group, that if you can turn the page a little bit and get more productive or more into a different mindset in that meeting, it can actually move the mission forward in incredible ways. This is the crucial meeting. So are you in this is my short pitch, or maybe now a long pitch, for invest time in planning for that meeting, because that's where good things are going to come out. Even when your meeting iterates and you go, oh, that was the agenda I thought we were going to be on, but now it's become this, and let it stew. So anyway, I kind of overbaked the point, but put some thought into that. Don't just meet to meet when it comes to your board.
Yeah. All right. The second thing. Now, this sort of depends on what your model is. So if you have a model of a elder board where you're bringing on new elders, or so they're all serving a term, so some are going off and some are coming on. The Presbyterian process is we have a team that nominates these folks from the congregation. So not everybody has that. Sometimes the elder situation is like they're kind of perma elders, like they're selected as elder and they're sort of stay forever. But one thing that I would encourage everybody to think about if you have sort of a rotating board is encourage your nominating team, or whoever's responsible for that, to find leaders, not doers.
Yeah.
This is the thing that most people miss quite accidentally, because it makes sense to bring on doers.
Yeah.
It's true with hiring too, by the way.
Yeah.
What do I mean? You want strategic thinkers, not just people who they want to list and get things done.
Mm-hmm.
Because the number one thing, and we'll talk about this in a couple points from now, but is you're spiritually discerning together. You're thinking mission vision. And if you have a staff, you're allowing the staff to run with the strategy. But you need some big picture thinking. So you need somebody who is a leader in that way and not somebody who is just, let's say, a worker bee. So I would say move away from worker bees towards strategic thinkers.
Yeah. And one way to work toward that is even to kind of write out a session job description or a board job description. I mean, just real
Good
short.
idea.
I'm not talking about a lot, but thinking what are the characteristics of the kind of person that we feel would be a good fit for leadership in this way. We have deacons, they're more hands-on ministry folks. We have elders who are big picture, let's set vision and direction for the church folks. And so who's wired for what? And getting your nominating team to even think in those terms. And it depends. In the Presbyterian system, we want a healthy separation between the pastor and choosing the elders so you don't stack the deck in
Absolutely.
your favor. We have those oversights and accountabilities. But I would remind everybody that as the pastor, you have voice but not vote on that team. You have input into that process. And I think one of the things we've really worked on encouraging our nominating team to think about is we're not just looking for warm bodies to fill seats. We're looking for people who really are called to lead and to discern, and that's what we're after. So just, I think, painting something of a picture of the kind of person that we believe is the right fit for our elder board, it helps our team because they want to do that work well. But sometimes they're like, well, so-and-so is willing and they're awesome and we like them. So why not give them a shot? So it just kind of gives them some extra layers of, or some tools for their own discernment about those things.
And what I've discovered, it's not always the case, but it's often the case that if you put a worker bee, someone who gets it done on the elder team, they don't do as well with giving forth on their perspective of a vision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They feel really uncomfortable doing that. You want to have people that are willing to do that. So that's kind of part of what's going on here. So in our system, we have deacons that really are more of the doers. So we always move those doers to the deacon team.
Yeah. In some traditions, the deacons are what we call elders. And
Yeah. So it just sort of depends on.
Yeah, it depends, right? But what you're saying, and this has been my experience, when we have more doer-minded people on our elder board, our leadership team, they get frustrated because they're like, when are we going to do something? And I'm like, well, the doing is what happens all the time in our ministry out there. But in here, we listen. Lord, what do you want us to be about? What direction would you have us go? What are the ideas and thoughts and the values related to that? And how do we more faithfully move in that direction with the things we do? And then we hand that vision off to teams and to people to put it into action. So sometimes the doers get really frustrated. They're like, when are we going to do something? How come we haven't made progress on? Or, I'm like, well, I'm sure it's in process, but let's think, but I'm a big picture guy. So I get a little bit, maybe too far the other direction. I don't know.
So again, move away from worker bees towards strategic thinkers.
That's
And then
right.
number 3, move away from weeds and toward the needs. You like that? Like what I did there? That was very,
nice.
Very preachy. Move away from the weeds and toward the needs. So what do I mean is, you really don't want your elder board involved in the minutia of what's happening in ministry, especially if you have a staff. So you want a clear division between elders and staff. No multiple hierarchy issues or staff feeling like they have multiple bosses.
Yep.
Let the board handle mission and vision, leave the strategy to the staff.
Mm-hmm.
And really the idea is the elder board should be thinking in terms of strategy support. Okay, so the staff are saying this is the strategy to accomplish the mission and vision. How do we make sure we support them with giving them the right size budget, and giving them the right size resources, and making sure we have a good volunteer team behind them? Like that's a healthier way to work. So I'll never forget when I was a youth minister and non-ordained position for a long time outside of Philadelphia. And I remember there was one time where I had a youth elder, and then there was also like a family ministry elder. and then my senior pastor, and then an associate pastor. There were a couple times I heard from all four of them of what I needed to be doing, and they didn't all say the same thing.
That's right.
It
That's
was
an office
so
space moment. Yeah, I like.
frustrating. It was an office space moment. It totally
Yeah,
was.
totally.
It was so frustrating, and it made it really hard to
Yeah.
get anything done because I felt beholden to every single one of those people. So it just created confusion, and the elders were getting mad that I wasn't doing what they wanted because senior pastor said something different, right? So
Well, how have you guys tackled that at Tower Hill? What shifted in your approach to make sure there's clear lines of sight for who's accountable to who?
Yeah, and I think I originally got this idea of the language from Carey Nieuwhof, but it's the idea of we're elder governed, staff led, people gifted.
Yeah.
So the elders are still in the Presbyterian system are still responsible. That's where the buck stops with ministry. So there is some oversight of the staff for sure. That's part of it. There's accountability there, but they're not getting in the way of the staff doing what they feel like needs to get done. And that's because the staff are the ones in the trenches. It's whenever like you want to trust the people who are seeing the needs firsthand rather than those who are sitting on the board. Hopefully there's some good reporting between the two, but you want the folks on your front lines making frontline decisions.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Well, for us, one of the key shifts that we made was just to be clear about my role as pastor and head of staff versus sort of an older model of committee, chair people that had a staff member attached to it. So if you have that model, what you have is an elder and a staff member, and then the pastor, and you had two more involved in that, right? And all of a sudden, who are you ultimately accountable to? If the pastor and the elder say different things, do you listen to the pastor and ignore the elder? And you have two bosses, and so that's an impossible situation. And so the way we've arranged it is I'm accountable to the session for the staff team, for better or worse. And so if you have a concern about a staff team member, if you want to talk with them, go right ahead. But ultimately, their accountability is to me. And so if there's things that need to be addressed or changed, they're going to come to me for me to then engage with a staff team member and deal with it that way. So we've just tried to be as clear as we can about where are our organizational lines of sight and who's accountable to whom. And that has helped. And it hasn't always gone down well for some elders that I think maybe are used to a different time when they got to kind of tell the staff what to do. So it's an adjustment if there's, if that's a new approach, but I think it actually creates health in the long run.
It does. So move away from the weeds and toward the needs. Number 4, move away from elders as individual advocates and toward spiritual discernment together. This is something Dan Ryland talks about, that sometimes when people join an elder board, they have this sense that they're supposed to advocate for whatever things are either important to them or they represent a constituency where they must vote accordingly or advocate accordingly. And I think the thing that you really want to work on, and we had seasons where we really needed to be intentional about this, is to remind people this is all about spiritual discernment together. You were elected by the congregation, but you don't have to vote what they tell you to vote. You are elected to this position of elder for such a time as this. And together we're going to spiritually discern what God wants us to do. And yes, we want to listen to the congregation. Of course you want to listen to the congregation, but at the same time, you've got to go with the team and what you feel God's calling you to do. So I think that's a big one, is moving away from this individual advocacy toward team.
One of the things I put on our nominating committee's radar is if someone, it seems like they have an axe to grind about a specific issue, that is not someone for our board, not because they don't have gifts or abilities, but because we are a discernment team. We're discerning together, not going, this is my issue that I want to, bring into reality here. And people care about stuff, so it comes up. We get, but you got to be careful with that. And I think one of the things, if you're not Presbyterian, maybe you need to help people adopt this mindset. But we kind of have this going for us that as elders and pastors, our job is to discern and to listen for our individual conscience before God in this decision. And so as a team, we're all listening for the voice of Jesus speaking through the Holy Spirit, working on our hearts through each other. listening to each other. God, what are you saying through that person, through our time, through this discussion, wrestling it out together. And that's a really cool thing. And so I don't think it was, who was the guy? He's an old guy from the Edmund Burke. He said, if we sacrifice our conscience to the whim and the will of the people, we betray both our conscience and their faith in us. So sometimes the congregation, they're not in that conversation, and they're not discerning. They might not have all the pieces. They might have an idea of what they think they want, but our job is to discern together, and then to decide and stand up together in that decision and own it together, even if it was a close vote or something like that. So anyway, you didn't know that we were going to bring in 18th century.
I mean, listen, nicely done, dude.
I know, Edmund Burke.
This is why we pay you the big bucks.
Yeah, our conscience before God, discerned, listen for the voice of Jesus together. That's that group. And so axe to grind kind of behavior is not what we're after, and we're listening together.
Yeah. So finally, and I mentioned this, I teed this up a little bit last week, but move away from the sociological toward the supernatural. And that is, there are some needs, some things you have to do as an organization. And those are important to do. I'm not saying skip those, but make sure they don't stay there. Make sure you're really thinking about, how do we lean into our relationship with God together and trust He's going to do things that only He can do. And so for me, on our elder board, it means really leaning into prayer, really leaning into what are the spiritual needs that we are trying to help people with. Where are we discerning God calling us? Like, these are all spiritual questions. And I would spend more of your meeting talking and doing those things than worrying about the yays and nays on just sort of logistics. Logistics are important, of course, but man, lump those together in some routine motions and save yourself some time and spend some time praying. Yeah,
I think that's spot on. And decide which nuts and bolts issues need a little bit of the session input to create buy-in, and which can be just, you know what, here's what's going on there. If you have more questions, let me know, but I just wanted to let you know that this is happening or something. So which issues get to raise to the surface for discussion and which don't. And I think that's wise, Jason, is to think in terms of the spiritual development of that team. If it's a spiritual discernment team, what are we doing to pray and to kind of create that posture of spiritual growth as a team together and listening for God to speak in our midst? And so, I think that's a shift for some people to move from this is a check-in reporting meeting in which we do the business of the church and we pray at the beginning and the end, but otherwise that's its purpose. What I hear you saying is, let's think of it as an opportunity to invest in our spiritual life together as a community for our discernment. So I think that's an important shift to be healthy. And it can actually, that's where the great outcomes come from, is when we're listening well and then feeling bold enough to risk in the direction that God would have us go. So really important conversation.
And if I were going to sort of give it a percentage, I would say my goal in our board meetings, because I do set the agenda for these meetings as the senior pastor, my goal is to spend 60 to 70% of the meeting on mission, vision, discernment, and the rest on logistics or reporting. So it's not like we're not doing any logistics or reporting, but I just try to make sure that the main thing's the main thing.
Yeah, and you can handle the reporting like you said. You can make it, our team fills out a report every month and the elders get to see it. If there's questions, let's talk about it. But we kind of get that piece. We don't all have to go around the circle and check in and report. We spend our time thinking about, are these, here's our vision and mission. What are the values related to that? What are we going to do? What's the next thing that God's putting on our horizon to be thinking about and praying about? So I love it. I think it's spot on thinking. And I'm sure some of our folks are like, here's kind of how we handle that. So however you're handling those meetings and whatever that percent that goes towards vision, mission, and discernment, maybe that's just something for you to think about. Go, here's my percentage. And we can all try to be like Jason and get to 60 or 70%. Or maybe some of you are at 80% and be like, we're running out ahead of that. So, but we want to be healthy in our leadership teams, because that's where the decisions are going to be made that step out in faith to lead into the fruitful outcomes, and where risk-taking can happen, and where we move forward together. So thinking in terms of a healthy leadership team, healthy and leader-minded people to be on those teams, it's just so important, such important work.
And all of this creates unity because now you're doing things together. You know exactly why you're doing them. Even if you personally didn't vote for them, you know exactly why we're doing them. You know exactly what you're hoping for. And hopefully there's a sense of excitement and moving forward together to accomplish, whatever it is, whatever the initiative is. Yeah. So again, I know it's not exciting. This is the sort of thing that drives people to go to a church conference. But I do think this is really critical when it comes to really moving your church forward.
Yeah. So, well, maybe thinking about it on the flip side, what would it feel like to go from fighting with your board to working together for a great purpose? Yeah. And that's the difference between an unhealthy versus a healthy environment in that situation. So it's worth working toward. It's urgent and it's important. So let's get to it.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, everyone, thanks for listening. I hope this has been helpful to you. Reach out to us anytime, Jason or Jesse at reclaimleader.com. We invite you to share this podcast with a colleague. It's the way that people, we have like zero advertising dollars. So, it's all word of mouth. So if you could share it, we'd really appreciate that. And I don't know, anything else before we sign off here? We're getting close to Easter, dude.
Yeah, it's coming right down the pipeline. So rooting for everybody. Hope all the prep for that is going well and that you're finding some time to breathe in the midst of all that. And grateful that you're tuning in and continue to be part of the conversation as we're just working in the trenches, trying to figure it out as we go.
Yeah. All right, everyone, as we say all the time, ministry is hard. It is so much better when we do it together. Take care.